Join me in welcoming from Atlanta, chocolate cake evangelist, serenity activist, Light Catalyst Katharine Pike.
You are all so beautiful. I'm just loving being here, and I'm grateful. And so we're here today. You obviously found your way here today, but I ask you, have you ever been lost? It doesn't take much to get lost, does it? One wrong turn. And have you ever heard of the maxim, the power of 1 degree? The power of 1 degree is that if you're off course by just 1 degree, in the beginning it doesn't matter. Because if you're off by just 1 degree, after about 3 minutes of traveling, you can do what? Course correct and just shift over, right? But what happens as the course continues? Does the 1 degree difference get further and further apart? So the longer you're going in the wrong direction, or the direction that's just not intended, the more difficult it's going to be to get back to where you were headed. So imagine that you were in New York City, leaving from New York Harbor and headed to London. If you're off by 1 degree, are you going to end up in London? No. You might end up, if it's south, you might end up in Morocco, which is not a bad place to be. I mean, I would like to go to Morocco. I don't know about you. So for the sake of convenience, we'll say for packing, we'd want to stay on course. Now, there was years ago that I was on a road trip, and I was leaving North Carolina. I was leaving Charlotte, the town where I grew up. I was extremely confident where I was headed back home to Atlanta because I've driven that course several times. And knowing Charlotte quite well, the roads are familiar to me. And so I got in the car and I headed on my way. And I'm not proud to say that I stopped several times to get gas, to get water, to stretch my legs, and still ended up at the border to Virginia, which, if you know your geography, is the exact wrong, opposite direction. So this was not off by 1 degree. This was off by how much? 180. So the point is, be careful, be mindful, watch, because if you don't watch where you're headed, you might get where you're going. If you don't watch where you're headed, you might get where you're going. In this case, I got where I was going, which was Virginia. Extremely inconvenient, as I was due in Atlanta in a few hours. Drive all the way back through North Carolina, all the way through South Carolina, and end up getting a hotel. It was extremely inconvenient. So I'm speaking today about watching, seeing, awareness. Watching. So if you're watching out for yourself, watching out for your life, watching out for your business, I'm asking you to think and consider who's doing the watching. Michael Singer, have you ever heard of him? He's a fantastic exercise, and I would love to do that with you now. Would you like to? Okay, fantastic. All you got to do is stay right where you are and close your eyes. And then silently to yourself, say roughly 10 times the word hello. Did you hear yourself saying hello? Did you hear that in your head? I'm getting 100% of nods. Everybody heard something in their head. Sounded a lot like hello. Who was doing the speaking? You. Who was doing the listening? You as well, right? But different aspects of you, right? Different aspects of you speak to yourself, and different aspects of you listen. There's a different aspect of you that is capable of watching in your life, of observing. Some cultures call this the higher self. Some cultures call it the observer. Some cultures call it the third eye. Are you familiar? Are you tracking with me? So you're not always just making decisions from your brain, from your prefrontal cortex. There's a part of you, there's an aspect of you that desires to be in collaboration with yourself, if you'll allow it, if you'll wake up and be aware of that aspect of yourself. Mindful awareness, which is what I teach and what I mentor people in businesses and people as individuals to cultivate. Mindful awareness is focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's thoughts and feelings. Why don't we practice this more often? I'll speak for myself. Why don't I practice this more often? Because what I'm aware of is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable sometimes to be aware of all that is there to be aware of. It's uncomfortable sometimes to be aware of all that there is to be aware of. And so what we'll do sometimes is check out, numb ourselves. I'm seeing a lot of nods. I really, really get what it's like to check out and to numb yourself, to not be with the feelings, not be with what's there, to be what's present. I was fired from Merrill Lynch in my early 20s when I had a promising future in that company. At the time, a Fortune 5 company. I worked in a brand new office on 55th Street between Madison and Fifth Avenue, if my memory serves me well. Does Madison and Fifth Avenue run parallel? I think they do, yeah. It's a really nice address. You walk into this office, gorgeous, huge domed ceiling, customized every bit, mahogany furniture, polished, gleaming. And I was asked to leave. I was asked to leave because I was a junkie. My boss called me into his office, Fred. Fred said, "Why don't you come sit down?" I was like, "Oh, he doesn't ever ask me to come into his office and sit down. We're not friends that way, we don't chat." He said, "We need to talk. We have a team of lawyers who have determined that you are addicted. You're an addict. And so we invite you to no longer work here." I was thinking, I've never taken drugs. At the time, I wasn't drinking a drop of alcohol because alcoholism runs in my family. And I had unpleasant experiences with it, and so I felt like I was living a clean life. Worse, I had already graduated from holistic health counseling school. I was a health counselor. I knew a lot about being healthy, and I still got myself fired for being an addict. Because if you could really visualize a needle hanging out of my arm, what would be in the needle would be a cupcake, chocolate cake, ice cream, all the deliciousness and yumminess of life. So after work some days, I would go to the bakery and I would look at all the gorgeous selections. Because in New York City, do they have good bakeries? Yeah, they've got good bakeries. Yeah, you know. And I'd go to that bakery and I would look and I would say, and the lady behind the counter would say, "What would you like?" And I would say, "Yes."
One of each.
And she would say, "Would you like a box of forks and a pile of napkins?" I'd say, "No, just one fork, please." And I would go home and I would eat every single one. It would take me a little bit of time. And then I would wake up the next day not remembering what happened. Crumbs on my clothes, rumpled drool. It's not pretty. I'd be late for work. Sometimes I'd call in with some cockamamie excuse, which is what got me fired. Yeah. And if I went to work, I was foggy-headed, sugar hangover. If you don't know that sugar is an addictive substance, ask the scientists. Years ago, Forbes magazine published research about multiple studies that have tested sugar on lab rats. And what they found is that the lab rats prefer sugar, specifically Oreos, which are delicious, right? Specifically, these lab rats prefer Oreos to cocaine. Specifically, these rats prefer Oreos to heroin 100% of the time. Again and again, different lab, different rats, and me. I prefer Oreos to heroin. I've never tried heroin, but who needs it when you got sugar, right? Whew. But you know what? All these years, sugar had me checking out. Sugar had me leaving my problems behind and not worrying about them. And that was my addiction. And when I gave up using food and freebasing food, I think that's what it looks like, freebasing food, I moved on to adrenaline sports, motorcycling, skydiving, driving really fast, until I ended up with a few crumpled cars. Anybody here work for State Farm? Okay, all right, good. All right, yeah, a few crumpled cars and a completely crumpled motorcycle. And it may not be that for you. It may not be adrenaline for you. It may not be sugar for you. It could be shopping. It could be cigarettes. It could be alcohol. It could be gambling. There are a lot of ways that we check out in life. There are a lot of ways we don't want to be aware. And I understand. I understand you because I couldn't be with awareness for a very long time. Couldn't deal with feelings, especially my own. Feelings of anger. Anger became another addiction. Righteousness. Feels good. It gives energy to be righteous and angry about something. So everybody in my life was a target for wrongness. Had me feeling more powerful. But isn't that silly? Because there's no power in pointing a finger at somebody. You've heard of that. When you point a finger at somebody, how many fingers are pointing back? More fingers are pointing back than pointing forward. Yeah. Mindful awareness. I invite you to shed some light on your life and take a look and watch and see what there is to see. And I assert that when you light the way, you see the way. When you light the way, you see the way. And you see with new perspective. Have you heard of the Tao? The Tao, a Chinese philosophy also known as the Way. And in the Tao, they speak about this path being like walking down a hallway as a blind person with a stick. And when you tap with the stick, eventually you notice that you've reached the edge. You've reached what? The limit of that hall, the wall. And what do you do when you tap the edge, when you tap the wall? You course correct. And you move to the other side, and you tap until when? You tap the other wall, and then you just course correct, and you gently move back and forth. Now, if you're me as a driver, it looks a whole lot more like a wham, crash, crumple, down, 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 fetal position, rocking. Build yourself back up and do it again until you exhaust yourself, and then you learn to gently tap. I invite you to gently tap to find your way. And if you light the way, it's easier to see what there is to see. I teach a mindfulness system called the Light system. The first letter of light is what? L. L stands for leveraging empathy. Leveraging empathy. Why does empathy matter, and how in the world does it apply to business? Interesting. And what is empathy? Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. The ability to understand and share. Empathy is not sympathy. Empathy is different. Empathy is feeling something, attempting to feel what the other person is feeling and thereby understand them. As opposed to judging, which would be a declaration of an action or person being right or wrong. Empathy versus judgment. I was driving along Roswell Road a couple of years ago, and there was this crazy driver in front of me just doing the most irrational things. And in a fit of just anger and frustration and impatience, I said, "What, are you blind?" And he took a left turn into the vision store. Where you buy glasses. I was like, that's the universe talking, thank you. Yes, he was blind. And on his way to the vision store. Careful. I snapped judgment, didn't I? Yeah. Empathy. If I could have really taken a moment to be in this person's shoes, and I would have said, wow, this person's really struggling to see where they're going. I wonder what that's like. I would have seen them go into the vision store and been glad that they were on their path to seeing something new. So what is it going on with the other person in your life? The person you're having a disagreement with, the person that maybe even that you love. What is it between you that's there to experience? I assert that there's a goodness in you. There's a goodness in all of you. And I have an exercise to help you get in touch with that. Would that be something fun for you? Okay, great. All you've got to do again is stay right where you are and close your eyes. And I invite you to be present in this moment to those aspects of you which are truly good. There is goodness in you. And I invite you to get in touch with your altruism, with your consideration, your kindness, the way you smile at someone. And as you're gently breathing, I invite you to breathe in this aspect of your goodness, the goodness that you're in touch with. Breathe it in and multiply it in your heart 10 times. And then breathe it out and send it to the world. Breathe in the aspect of you which is good. Multiply it in your heart. And with your breath, send it out into the world. And now as you're breathing, I invite you to connect with an aspect of goodness in someone near you, even all of the people in this room, because everyone has an aspect of goodness. I invite you to keep your eyes closed and to connect with the aspect of goodness of the people in this room. Breathe that in, multiply it in your heart by 10 times, and send it back to the room. It can be helpful to some to imagine this aspect of goodness as a white light. Take in this ribbon of white light into your heart, multiply it, allow it to shine brilliantly and brightly, and send it back into the room. And I invite you to send, as you're multiplying this light, send it beyond the room to our whole city and to everyone on the planet. And you may open your eyes. And I ask you, is there anyone here who is not present to the nature of their heart? Are you all present to the nature of your heart? You feel it, don't you? Did it get warmer? Yeah. Empathy. Empathy is a business skill, believe it or not. With empathy, you can build better business relationships because you can develop trust. Trust is at the foundation of all business relationships. In fact, the leading thinkers in the areas of business productivity and effectiveness, namely Mark Lesser, speaks about trust being the number one skill, the ability to trust someone and be trusted, the number one skill. And Patrick Lencioni, who speaks about dysfunction of teams and businesses, has a pyramid, and the foundation of the pyramid is lack of trust, leads to all other dysfunction in business teams. When you have empathy in your business relationships, you can develop proactivity. You can encourage proactivity in others because you're not afraid of the reaction you might get. You're not afraid, the person who's with you is not afraid of the reaction you're going to give them. They feel trusting that you can be with whatever they produce. So they're going to be proactive about it. And trust that you'll understand them, understand their intentions, which are almost always good. When you feel safe, you're safe to innovate. You're safe to come up with ideas that might seem a little crazy and cockamamie at first to some, but someone else, if they're trusted, might say, let's talk about that. Let's invite a deeper conversation about that. Tell me what you're thinking. And then there's brainstorming, and then the ideas start popping, because neither of you are afraid to say what's really there. Also, collaboration. If you know someone's got your back, are you more interested in collaborating? What if there were no judgment in a business relationship? What if you knew you could always show up and be just loved? What if you knew you could always show up and just be loving? Would it be more fun? Would you be more courageous about approaching someone for a business relationship? Do you think that you might seize more opportunities? And with more opportunities, there is more money. With empathy, you can create better business relationships and create more money in a beautiful, loving way, with proactivity, innovation, trust. And develop your leadership skills at the same time. Bonus. When you're known as someone who's trustworthy, who is trusting, you are a natural leader. People want to be around you. They want to help you. They want to be on your team. So I ask you to take a look at your life and see what you see. Are you always feeling in your life, do you always feel safe to share what you see? Do you always feel safe to share your views? And do others always feel safe to share their views with you? And the answer may not be no. The answer may not be yes. It is what it is for your life. It does invite you to look. Because when you light the way, you can see the way. And you can see with new perspective. I have a beautiful family member. Her name is Kitty. That is her given name. She lives in South Carolina. And when she was growing up in the 50s, she always sat in the front of the class, considered a great student, always eager, right there in front of the blackboard. And it turned out she was at the front of the class because she couldn't see the blackboard. She couldn't see very well at all. In fact, when she got glasses for the first time, those really neat cat eye glasses, you remember those in those pictures from the 50s? She had the greatest glasses, these gorgeous blue eyes behind those glasses. She looked up at the tree in her yard, a big pecan tree, tremendous, which she had been drawing since a child. And what do you do when you're a child? You make a stem for the trunk and you do a big blob of green with a crayon, right? That's actually what she saw. And with her glasses, she looked up and for the very first time saw the shimmering leaves blowing in the wind and reflecting the light like magic. And for the very first time in her life, she saw leaves, individual leaves on a tree, and had never known until then that's what a tree looked like. She had never seen that before. So with a new lens of awareness, I invite you to ask yourself, what would you see? What do you see now? And what would you see then with the light of awareness occurring in your life? When you light the way, you see the way. And you see with new perspective. Thank you.